What I'm about to explain today may genuinely surprise a lot of people watching this video, because one of the most dangerous health problems affecting adults over 50 right now often does not begin with chest pain, collapse, or dramatic medical emergencies. It begins with something people dismiss every single day: racing thoughts, tightness in the chest, dizziness, a shaky feeling, trouble catching your breath, sudden fatigue, feeling off, feeling overwhelmed, feeling like something terrible is about to happen. And almost instantly, people tell themselves, it's probably just anxiety. Now, sometimes, they're right. Anxiety is incredibly common. Stress can absolutely create real physical symptoms. In fact, the brain and body are deeply connected in ways many people still underestimate. But here's the part that concerns doctors. There are certain medical conditions that quietly imitate anxiety so closely that people can spend months, sometimes even years, treating themselves for stress while the real issue underneath continues progressing silently. And honestly, I've seen this happen more times than most people would ever imagine. My name is Dr. Adam Scott Levin, and for more than 15 years I've worked with adults dealing with cardiovascular disease, metabolic dysfunction, nervous system disorders, inflammation-related conditions, and stress-driven health changes that often overlap in surprisingly deceptive ways. And today, I want to walk you through something incredibly important: how certain dangerous health problems can mimic anxiety, why that confusion happens, which warning signs deserve more attention, and how to approach symptoms calmly without falling into fear or panic. Because this conversation is not about convincing people every symptom is dangerous. It's about helping people understand the difference between stress that feels physical and physical problems that quietly disguise themselves as stress. And once you understand that difference, you start looking at the body very differently. Before we go deeper, I want to ask you something. Have you ever experienced a period where you felt constantly anxious, shaky, dizzy, exhausted, or mentally overwhelmed, only to later discover there was something physical contributing to it? And how old are you? Drop your age and experience in the comments below, because I read these discussions carefully, and honestly, many people watching this channel realize they're not alone for the very first time through conversations like these. Now let's begin with one of the biggest misunderstandings in modern health culture. People often think anxiety exists separately from the body, as if anxiety is purely emotional, purely psychological, purely mental. But biologically, anxiety symptoms are physical symptoms. That's what makes this so complicated. When stress hormones rise, the body changes immediately. Heart rate changes, breathing changes, blood pressure changes, muscle tension changes, blood sugar changes, digestion changes, circulation changes, and because those same systems are involved in actual medical conditions, the overlap becomes incredibly confusing. That's why doctors have to look at patterns, not isolated symptoms. I remember one patient in his early 60s who came into clinic convinced he was simply burned out. He described episodes of sweating, shakiness, sudden weakness, racing heartbeat, and overwhelming panic sensations that seemed to appear randomly during the day. He thought stress was catching up with him after retirement, but after further evaluation, we discovered his blood sugar was dropping unpredictably because of poorly regulated diabetes combined with irregular eating patterns. His body was repeatedly triggering adrenaline surges to compensate. What he interpreted emotionally as panic was actually a physiological stress response happening inside the body. And once his glucose regulation stabilized, the anxiety attacks decreased dramatically. Now, that does not mean every anxious feeling comes from blood sugar problems. Not at all. But it shows how deeply physical and emotional symptoms can intertwine. And honestly, this is where many people get trapped. They either assume everything is anxiety, or they assume everything is dangerous. The healthiest approach usually lives somewhere in between. Now, let's talk about the heart for a moment, because this is another area where confusion happens constantly. Many cardiac symptoms can initially feel emotional rather than physical, especially in adults over 50. People expect heart problems to look dramatic: severe chest pain, collapse, Hollywood-style emergencies. But certain cardiovascular issues can appear far more subtly: shortness of breath, sudden exhaustion, chest tightness, pressure sensations, sweating, dizziness, unusual fatigue after small activities, racing heartbeat at rest. And because stress itself can create similar sensations, people sometimes dismiss important symptoms for far too long. I remember a woman in her late 50s who repeatedly told herself she was just anxious. Every evening she developed chest pressure and a strange feeling of restlessness while climbing stairs. She assumed it was stress because her life had become emotionally overwhelming after caring for an aging parent. But eventually testing revealed significant coronary artery disease, and what shocked her most was that she never experienced the crushing chest pain she expected heart disease to cause. Now again, this is not about panic. Most chest discomfort is not automatically a heart attack, but persistent, unexplained physical changes deserve calm medical evaluation rather than endless self-diagnosis online. And that distinction matters enormously. Now, here's something even more surprising. Thyroid dysfunction can also mimic anxiety so convincingly that many people spend years misunderstanding what's happening to them. When thyroid hormones become dysregulated, the nervous system often speeds up dramatically. People can develop heart palpitations, heat intolerance, trembling, insomnia, irritability, weight changes, brain fog, fatigue, and overwhelming nervous energy. From the outside, it can look exactly like chronic anxiety. I remember one patient who described feeling internally restless for almost an entire year. She thought she was developing panic disorder, but blood testing later showed significant hyperthyroidism. Once treated properly, many of the sensations she believed were purely emotional began stabilizing. And honestly, stories like this are why doctors try to look at the entire body, not just isolated symptoms. Now let's talk about something that almost nobody discusses enough: sleep deprivation. Because sleep loss itself can create symptoms so intense that people genuinely believe something catastrophic is happening. Poor sleep increases cortisol. It destabilizes blood sugar. It amplifies inflammation. It increases heart rate variability. It heightens emotional reactivity. And after enough nights of poor sleep, the nervous system can begin living in a constant state of hyper-alertness. People feel shaky, emotionally overwhelmed, sensitive to stress, mentally foggy, physically exhausted but unable to relax. And once fear enters the picture, the cycle intensifies. The less people sleep, the worse symptoms become. The worse symptoms become, the more anxious they feel. The more anxious they feel, the harder sleep becomes. Doctors see this pattern constantly now, especially in adults dealing with chronic stress, excessive screen exposure, caregiving exhaustion, loneliness, financial stress, or ongoing health worries. And perhaps the most important thing I want people to understand today is this: the body does not separate emotional stress from physical stress nearly as cleanly as people imagine. The nervous system responds to both. That's why symptoms often overlap. Now let's discuss one final area that deserves more attention: chronic inflammation. Because low-grade inflammation has become deeply connected to modern metabolic disease, poor sleep, cardiovascular dysfunction, obesity, insulin resistance, and even mood changes. Inflammation affects the brain, the nervous system, hormones, energy production, stress response pathways, and sometimes people living with chronic inflammation describe feeling constantly uneasy inside their own body without fully understanding why. Fatigue, restlessness, brain fog, low resilience, poor recovery, sleep disruption, heart-pounding sensations. This is one reason modern medicine increasingly focuses on lifestyle stability rather than quick symptom suppression alone. Better sleep. walking, blood sugar control, stress reduction, whole foods, social connection, consistent routines. These things may sound simple, but biologically, they stabilize many of the same systems that become dysregulated in both anxiety disorders and chronic disease states. And honestly, that may be one of the biggest hidden truths in modern health right now. The body functions best with stability, not constant extremes, not endless panic, not obsessive symptom searching, stability. Now here's the part I really want you to remember. Not every anxious feeling means something dangerous is happening, but not every physical symptom should automatically be dismissed as anxiety either. That balance matters, because the goal is not fear, the goal is awareness, calm awareness. The healthiest people are usually not the ones obsessively monitoring every sensation. And they're also not the people ignoring their body completely. They're the people willing to pay attention calmly, seek evaluation when needed, and support the body consistently over time. That approach protects both physical health and mental health together. And honestly, in today's world, that balance may be more important than ever. So here's the final takeaway. If your body feels persistently different, if symptoms keep repeating, if something feels unusual, or if physical sensations are interfering with daily life, don't panic. But don't endlessly self-diagnose online either. Talk to a qualified medical professional. Look at the full picture. Consider both emotional and physical contributors. Because sometimes anxiety is truly anxiety, and sometimes the body is trying to tell you something deeper. The key is learning how to listen without fear.